in what he has and hasn't done, and he's not concerned about Michael Cohen.
Cohen is one of President Trump's most loyal aides. He pleaded guilty to lying to Congress, tax fraud, and a campaign finance violation. Teachers in Oakland are the latest to strike, and on day 2, they're back at the bargaining table. Jessica Rosenthal has the latest.
Oakland Education Association President Keith Brown encouraged teachers Friday morning to get back to protesting, much like they did Thursday as bargaining talks resumed.
We are staying strong and building off of the momentum of yesterday. Thousands of teachers united with parents and community. Keep the picket line strong.
Teachers are asking for a 12% raise, retroactive to 2017, smaller class sizes, and more resources for students. District officials have offered a 7% raise over the next 4 years with a one-time bonus. They say they have to work within a budget, but the teachers insist there's more than enough money available. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
An Islamic critic says anti-Semitism against Israel would be normalized if someone like Bernie Sanders is elected president in 2020. Chad Groening has more.
The 77-year-old self-described socialist launched his 2020 campaign this week, entering an already crowded field of Democrats who also embrace many of his policy ideas and are newer to the national political stage. That's far different from 2016, when he was Hillary Clinton's lone progressive adversary. Robert Spencer is the director of Jihad Watch. He says Sanders epitomizes the increasing hostility to Israel on the left, and his complete support for Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, despite her anti-Semitism, is a sign of that.
It's not, of course, limited to him. It's all across the Democratic Party that you have the same attitude toward Israel, which is what makes for somebody like Ilhan Omar, who should be condemned, to be accepted within the party and considered to be within the mainstream. It's just another sign that anti-Semitism is becoming normalized within the Democratic Party establishment.
And Spencer is concerned that so many American Jews are likely to support Sanders against Donald Trump.
Jews in America voted overwhelmingly for Obama, for Hillary Clinton, and they don't seem to get the idea at all that they're not voting in favor of their own interests. And they are increasingly supporting a party that is actively opposed to the right of Israel to exist, and one that is aiding and abetting the jihad against Israel.
And Spencer says many Democratic voters will buy into the ridiculous claim that Donald Trump, the most pro-Israel president in history, is anti-Semitic. I'm Chad Groening.
People on all sides of the abortion issue are going to be watching the Senate on Monday.
The Senate is expected to vote Monday on the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. Carol Tobias of the National Right to Life Committee says there are babies who survive abortions, and the abortionist can, either like Kermit Gosnell, find a way to kill the baby, or in many cases the baby is just put off to the side and left abandoned until he or she dies.
So this bill in the Senate would say that anybody involved in that abortion is responsible for taking care of that child.
In terms of how senators may vote, Tobias says there are 2 Republican senators that she's not sure about, and possibly 2 Democrats who will vote for the bill.
But otherwise, we are going to see a pretty straight party line split, with Republicans supporting protection for those babies who survived an abortion, and Democrats opposing any requirement that the child be taken care of in any manner. Every pro-lifer should contact their senators, whether they are pro-life or pro-abortion, and tell them that we need them to pass Senate Bill 311 to protect those babies.
According to Congress.gov, the bill has 49 co-sponsors. I'm Chris Woodward.
For American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh.
Stand by.
The B-Sack Radio Show spotlights Christian rap artists.
But never try to put me on the pedestal. The Lord is working on me. I'm getting better still.
Hear in-depth interviews and news about upcoming releases.
What's your motivation? Jesus, he's our motivation.
B-Sack is the Biblically Sound Artist Coalition.
Ready or not,
Don't miss the B-Sack Radio Show. Saturdays from 10 a.m. to noon Central on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Mr. Smollett is the one that orchestrated this crime. Bogus police reports cause real harm.
President Trump says an Alabama woman who joined ISIS in Syria will not be allowed to re-enter the U.S.
There has been no Russian collusion except by Hillary Clinton and Steele and all of those folks that were using the Russians to get dirt.
The idea that President Trump needed to collude with Russia in order to beat Hillary Clinton is frankly laughable.
And now, Stacy Washington.
I love it when Sarah Huckabee Sanders breaks down something that we all know so simply, so freshly, so perfectly articulated, which is the Russians might have bought ads on Facebook, and they might have hacked into systems, and they might have even had something to do with WikiLeaks putting out all the Democrats' business, but they certainly didn't help elect President Donald Trump. So welcome to the program. Thanks for making your home here at American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. I'm Stacy Washington, Second Amendment Foundation's 2018 Journalist of the Year, co-chair of Project 21, National Center's Advisory Council, Project 21, and also hostess with the mostest over here at Stacy on the Right. I'm so excited for the show today. I want to let you know it's Open Line Friday, as it were. You can call in and chat about anything you want. I love talking to the listeners, especially on Fridays, because everyone seems to be a little more jubilant, a little more buoyant, a little more, you know, take your favorite adjective. Everyone's a little extra on Friday, me included. Super excited about getting in the pew this weekend and also spending some time with family, unplugging, but also the show today. So today on the program, we're going to be talking to John Malcolm. He was on, I think, last week with some rapid fire delivery. We're going to get updates from him on where things stand now that 16 states have tried to basically put their little stompy foot down. They're upset that the president has declared a national emergency. They're trying to put a stop to it. And he's going to come on and talk to us about the legal aspects and ramifications of these lawsuits and how he thinks they'll progress. And we're also going to be talking about Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is not receiving the same love from the Democrats that he received back when he ran the last time. And this time it's because they're really concerned that this independent doesn't hold their ideals. And as much as I disagree with so much of what the Democrats do, and I think that this is really too weak of an action, just requiring him to sign a piece of paper, it's not enough. But I do see what they're trying to do here, and I respect it. And I hope they'll actually be empowered to do more, because Bernie Sanders is putting forward ideas that are dangerous to America. And Democrats should not affiliate themselves with those ideas. In fact, if we had the true Democrats of old, we would be arguing about things that have to do with maintaining our prosperity and just how to do it. How to do taxation, how to do the certain things that are constitutionally mandated or not mandated. I don't believe taxation is constitutionally mandated, but the things that we do in our federal government, whether it's caring for the poor or our foreign, for our foreign policy, or even how we deal with our domestic policy issues, we used to be able to argue with the Democrats about that, and it was just, hey, we have a difference of opinion. Now they're over there with Che Guevara and other, just the craziest of ideas. They're espousing not just socialism, but some things that are straight up communism, the complete and utter control of certain industries by the government, taxation through confiscation, moving beyond simple taxation to actually clawing back what people have earned and just taking it, just basically saying, look, you can't have that. I guess we weren't really understanding what Barack Obama meant when he said you didn't earn that, you didn't build that. He really meant anything you have is subject to us taking it from you. Get over it. So this is just a tiny little step, them making Bernie Sanders declare himself as a Democrat. But that's a two-edged sword, isn't it? If Bernie Sanders is a Democrat, if he is allowed to come into the party with those ideas and call himself a Democrat, then who are the Democrats really? So we'll dig into that. We'll take your calls at 866-963-2037. I got Friday brain already. 866-963-2037. And I'm only in one cup of coffee. That's how busy the morning was this morning. I actually went to try something new to deal with I have some neck pain and back pain. And so I went to a chiropractor. Oh my goodness. Now, if you hate chiropractors, I'm not telling you to go to one. If you love them, awesome. I'm so glad. I'm not espousing one way or the other. I just shared with you that I went to one this morning to try to take care of some neck pain. So that was a pretty interesting visit, and I'm glad I got a chance to do it, but it kind of sucked up a lot of my day. So I want to launch into a little bit of encouragement for today. And this is to go into the weekend, and it's so simple, it's so quick, it's so sweet. And it's a scripture that I actually have on one of those cool little cards that I sometimes talk to you guys about. I'm showing it on the live stream. It's a tiny little card that came with a book that I did a Bible study that was affiliated with. And the cards are to prompt you to pray about scripture, to pray back the scripture to God. And this one is, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. And that's Psalm 46:1. So whether it's a major problem or a small difficulty, something that you consider to be kind of like, why would God bother with this? He wants to bother with it. He's not bothered at all. He's God. He's ready to come in and deal with the smallest of issues to the large, really weighty issues that you're facing. And I say that because, you know, we all have things that we're going through. And this is something that I try to remind myself. And I often fall down on the job, but I just try to pick myself back up and attack it again. And that is, I try to remember that whatever the face of the person that I'm dealing with, whether I'm in the store buying some food, or, you know, the cashier, or any person that you're interacting with, even if it's somebody on the elevator, whether they look completely happy or totally miffed and, you know, like don't even make eye contact, every person is dealing with their own unique set of issues and things that they're working on. And sometimes the problems are overwhelming. And so the face that we see staring back at us, that face could use us giving them a smile, giving them some encouragement, trying to brighten their day, even if our day isn't that bright. And so I just want to encourage you. God is your refuge. He is your strength, a very present help in trouble, meaning he's right here, right now, available to you. And one way to really feel God's presence and to access him immediately is obviously to meditate on his word. But also, if you're feeling that strain, pick up the phone and call someone and pray together, or grab your daughter or your son's hand, or your husband or your wife's hand, and say, look, let's just pray together for a minute, and invite God into that situation, and he will work and he will do it. So I hope that takes you off into the weekend in a great way. Please be encouraged, and know that God is here to help us. He is always present. So right now, I actually have a little bit of audio that I want to talk about. I also want to talk about the president taking the extraordinary step of using Title IX funds from the government to defund $60 million from Planned Parenthood. This is breaking news. I also have some other breaking news about the lawsuit against one of the people who did the undercover videos with the Center for Medical Progress and David Daleiden. That person is actually under threat of no longer having their freedom. Planned Parenthood is suing them, and the judge is now going to permit in closed session for the videos that are the subject of the lawsuit to be viewed by the jurors and the judge, everybody involved in the case. Planned Parenthood had sought an injunction to stop the videos from being played during the trial, but since the videos are the subject of the trial, the judge has said, yes, they will be played. So a lot of movement going on. And if you're one of those prayer warriors out there, if you're one of those Annas, or, you know, if you're a man, you're still a prayer warrior. If you're out there and you're praying on this issue, don't stop. Keep praying about this. We've had people call in on the show, especially with the different developments about trying to get, you know, late-term abortion enshrined in state law and all of that in New York and Virginia. And people have been on this air with tears streaming down their faces, sharing their testimonies and talking about how much they want to see the biblical view of life spread throughout this land. God numbers our tears. He holds them in the palm of his hand, and he is moving. So don't stop praying about this. I believe we're going to have the victory. Obviously, we're going to have the victory on this. So let's go to the phones. Ernest in Michigan. Hey, thanks for calling the show today. Happy Friday.
Hey, Stacy, how you doing? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes, Stacy. You made a statement maybe a month and a half ago, as it relates to the border control, and you had made a statement that you wish Donald Trump would go ahead and issue the RFID chip. Am I correct? Did you say that?
No. You're talking about some kind of biometric chip that goes into a person?
Yes.
No. I don't think you should do that.
Okay.
Is that something that is that something that's actually a possibility? Are you talking about for people who are in the country illegally, or what would that be exactly?
I'm just talking about overall. I'm gonna try to make this fast.
Sure.
The RFID chip. Some companies are allowing employees to get it volunteer. I believe it will become mandate at the Vatican. The papacy is also for this chip. And what I did was I did some research as it relates to buying and selling. I'm trying to make this fast. I hope you know where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
In Revelation, when it talks about not being able to buy and sell unless you have the mark of the beast, the beast represents three things as it relates to the Bible. It talks about a kingdom in Daniel chapter 7. At the Vatican, the papacy in Revelation is the harlot church. He's promoting this chip, and he said it can be used for a lot of purposes. What I did do in Michigan here, I went to one of the largest Catholic churches, and I asked one of the members, were the fathers of the church promoting the chip, and they said yes, it would just be for insurance purposes. This is what I believe, Stacy.
Wow. Okay.
I believe the chip will become mandate. Donald Trump is also for the RFID chip. I'm going to step out and say I believe he's going to get reelected because I believe God is putting people in place so his work can be fulfilled. You don't worship a computer. You worship something you give to a person. Maybe another National Sunday law is coming. I don't know if you've done your research on the Vatican, the papacy. She is the Holy Church in Revelation chapter 17. I'm trying to make this quick. A lot of people know where I'm coming from on this. The system will be totally intact. You won't be able to buy and sell unless you're part of this religious system. So hopefully somebody else will call in and comment on this.
Thank you so much, Ernest, for calling in with that information. And I'm not actually, obviously, I don't support people RFID chipping themselves. Like, we've chipped our dog, so he has a chip in him. So if we lose him, we can find him. Or if someone else finds him, or if an animal shelter finds him, they will know that he belongs to us. But, again, I don't support that for people, but I do believe the Bible is true. I do not claim to be an expert in Bible prophecy, but I believe that we're called as Christians to, yes, we need to be concerned with the end times, but the main thing that we're supposed to do as Christians is work every day on our own personal obedience to make sure that we are in God's will, doing what he has asked us to do, but also to be doing the work of the church. So discipling others, bringing people to the gospel, and doing the ministry work that we're called to do in our area. So where you work, where you go to school, where you worship, in your neighborhood, in the community center, maybe the YMCA where you work out, or the Gold's Gym, wherever your footprint is, that's where you're supposed to be doing God's will, which is obviously you're in the ministry field. You're in the ministry field, whether you are down in Uganda and, on a mission, or whether you're walking up and down the streets of St. Louis, going to and from your work and buying a cup of coffee on the way. The ministry field is wherever you find yourself. And I don't have anything against people who do biblical prophecy, but I definitely feel like, it can become a distraction to try to figure out what is going to happen. God has told us what's going to happen. He's also told us what we're supposed to do. We have to be busy working for him. The Bible says we're supposed to have our lamps trimmed and full of oil, which is a euphemism from the time for people being prepared. You don't want your employer to come back to work if he goes to lunch or goes away on a business trip and find everything in disarray and you not doing what you're supposed to do. Whether he's there or not, you're supposed to be doing your job. It's the same, but even to a much more grand context for Christians. We are to be doing God's work, whether we feel like he's present or not. He's present, but we're to be doing his work. And so I know about the RFID chip, and I think the most important thing about that is just, you pray about it, and if it's not required, why would you even want the chip in your body? If it's for ease of shopping and all of that, sometimes we can be ungrateful for what we have and try to make things too easy and inadvertently place ourselves in out of God's will for us. So, I don't need things to be that easy. Scanning into work with a card is plenty easy enough for me. Using a credit card or a debit card is plenty easy enough for me. And so I just think you should pray about that if that's something that's on your horizon from your employer. We're going to be back with John Malcolm of the Heritage Foundation. You keep it here.
Hello, I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. On our Spiritual Heritage Tour, Washington, D.C., we go to the Supreme Court. That's one of the places we go on day one, and we visit the inside chambers. We go to where the justices sit, and it's an amazing place to visit. The Supreme Court of the United States. We don't just look at the outside, we go to the inside and see where the justices sit and where oral arguments are heard. So that's just one of the places we visit. On one of the days, we're in Washington, D.C., and we also go to Mount Vernon, the home of George and Martha Washington. So we're going in September. June's full. September will be filling up soon. If you want more information on this Spiritual Heritage Tour, go to spiritualheritagetours.com. That's spiritualheritagetours.com.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a legacy moment. I once read a compelling biography of the 18th century pioneer Daniel Boone. Among many other accomplishments, he is credited with founding the state of Kentucky. Daniel Boone is a study in determination. He was driven and determined to settle and establish this new western frontier, but along the way he watched family and friends die from bloodshed and disease. But in the end, he experienced the reward of his determination. Courage is not the absence of fear, but determination to do what must be done. And the call of God demands focused determination when, not if, opposition comes. God tells Joshua in chapter 1, verses 6, 7, and 9, to stay the course despite the pressure and the problems and the pain he will experience in occupying the land. Listen to these words. Be strong and courageous, for you shall give this people possession of the land which I swore to their fathers to give them. Verse 7 says, only be strong and very courageous. And then down in verse 9, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Courage is like faith. It gets stronger with exercise. And focused determination is required, because when you're in the will of God, there will definitely be opposition. I want to encourage you today. Just because you're having some problems in implementing what you think is right does not necessarily mean you should second-guess yourself. It could just mean that the enemy of your soul is angry because you are pursuing the heart and the will and the purposes and the plan of God. Well, here's what I want you to remember today. Exercise that courage muscle. God's assignments for our lives demand focus, determination, and courage. Like Daniel Boone, like Joshua, how determined are you really?
Legacy Moment with Crawford Loritz is produced by Moody Radio, a ministry of Moody Global Ministries.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Hello. If you've ever watched Frasier from back in the day, that's a reference to Daphne's crazy mom, and that's how she used to answer the phone, and that's how she used to get in trouble too. So for people who don't watch that, sorry, that reference is kind of crazy. Right now, it's my pleasure to welcome wonderful guest. We so enjoyed our last chat with him, and it's a continuation. We need an update, and who better to make it for us than John Malcolm, Vice President for the Institute for Constitutional Government at the Heritage Foundation. John, happy Friday.
Well, I'm tempted to give you a Frasier greeting, but I'll refrain. It's good to be with you.
I know. Sometimes I do it, and my family has gotten so used to it that they just do it back. I'll answer my cell phone. I'm like, hello. And they're like, oh, geez, here she goes. So I was so excited to see that we'd gotten you back again because I saw the lawsuits. We expected those. The president said, hey, I'm going to declare a national emergency. There's going to be a ton of people who are going to sue me. They're going to take it to the wacky Ninth Circuit, and then it'll end up at the Supreme Court. So we knew what was going to happen. But 16 states, I've actually had people messaging me on different social media saying, I'm so ashamed. I live in a state that's suing to stop the national emergency, but I'm totally against that. You know, I almost feel like I need to wear a sign that says I'm for the national emergency because my state's suing to stop it. So what's the validity here? Like, how do states have the right to enjoin the president from declaring a national emergency when that's something that's remanded to the executive?
Well, there are various theories of standing. The California suit, that's the one in which California is leading a consortium of 16 states. They have environmental theories saying that before you build any kind of a barrier along the southern border, that you need to get some kind of an environmental impact statement. And then they have this somewhat strange claim, which is to say, look, a lot of this money is being diverted from military construction projects, and that is money that otherwise would have been spent in all likelihood on military construction projects in our state, and therefore we're losing out on that money and have a direct financial harm. I have a hard time buying that theory for the simple reason that, one, out of the $8.1 billion that the president is seeking, $4.5 billion of it did not require any declaration of a national emergency. I can go through that if you want. It's the last $3.6 billion that did require a declaration of a national emergency. That does come out of a pot of money in the Pentagon set aside for military construction projects, but that has been money that has already been appropriated but not otherwise obligated. So the Secretary of Defense would have spent that money or might have spent that money, but he could have spent it in any of these states. And it's very, very speculative for any state to say, well, I know with absolute certainty that I was going to be getting some of that money. If that money had already been obligated, that might be somewhat of a more plausible argument, but it wasn't obligated.
Well, and then, so there's so much going on here. Like, for the things that you just explained, it's so logical, but I guess it's for me to assume, John, that these individuals, these states that are suing are ignoring what you've just shared because the end goal here is to simply stop him from completing the wall. So it's not an issue of the validity of the declaration. It's an issue of them finding a loophole or a judge or whatever they can find to stop it. Am I right about that?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And again, the one thing that's going to be I'll be curious to see how these judges that have these lawsuits, there's the one in California, there have been two filed here in the district, and the ACLU is saying it's going to file a lawsuit any day now. I don't know how they're going to handle the fact that $4.5 billion to build a barrier along the southern border did not require a declaration of a national emergency. So again, Congress gave him $1.4 billion as part of the appropriations package. $600 million is coming from the Treasury's Asset Forfeiture Fund. The statute that governs that fund makes it very clear that any surplus funds left over, the Secretary of Treasury can designate to any law enforcement agency for law enforcement purposes. There's no question that what's going on along the southern border involves human smuggling and drug interdiction, so those are law enforcement activities. And then $2.5 billion he's getting out of another Pentagon program. It's a drug interdiction program. That's pursuant to a law that was signed into law by President Obama, and that makes it very clear that the Secretary of the Pentagon can use funds to, among other things, erect fences or a barrier along any border where drugs are crossing into our country. So none of that money required a declaration of a national emergency, so that even if these challengers somehow got a court to say that this was a manufactured crisis and it's not a national emergency, or if it is, it doesn't require the use of the armed forces and they don't really need a barrier to support them anyway, that would set aside that $3.6 billion, but the other $4.5 billion would still be there, and that's the bulk of the $5.7 billion that the president originally asked for.
Okay, so how do you see this playing out? Obviously, they're going to their court of choice, one of the liberal courts that will give them the initial injunction that they need, which doesn't stop the president from using anything that's already ongoing. He already has some money that's been allocated to this project, and it's already not only allocated, it's appropriated, it's everything. It's totally lawful, and these repairs, replacements, and new construction of the old existing wall, and even some of the new prototype wall, these things have already been approved and are moving forward. But they're going to try to stop the national declaration money, which you just designated how much that is. How do you see this moving forward through the courts, starting with the 9th, which is where we assume this is going to be?
Well, I think they'll try to get it all set aside, and probably again using some kind of an environmental theory, saying that before he can do anything beyond renovating existing barriers, that he needs to do some kind of an environmental impact study, or homeowners along the barrier will say, well, Congress hasn't given him specific authority to seize our land under eminent domain and try to stop him that way. The case has been assigned to Judge Gilliam, whom I don't really know. I know he's an Obama appointee, and I know that in one of the other matters, he had previously entered a nationwide injunction against the president to stop him from doing some other policy initiative that he tried to do. So the challengers have got a good pick from their perspective, at least as first blush. They are moving for injunctive relief. We'll decide. I assume it'll be on briefing will be on an expedited basis. We'll see how quickly a court rules. But if there is one of these nationwide injunctions entered, it's going to elevate very, very quickly through the appellate system. And, of course, while those cases are pending, the Supreme Court can either allow that injunction to stand or can lift the injunction pending a declaration of the merits, which is what they did in the travel ban case. We will see just what these judges do and what reasoning they employ to do what it is they're going to do.
Okay, what do you think they're going to, so the Supreme Court as it sits, which I know this is an odd thing to hear coming from Stacy on the right, but I was happy to see Justice Ginsburg back in the saddle. And as I guess a reward for me not being petty and mean and wishing that she wasn't there, she ruled in this case earlier this week, John, this fantastic case where they are actually forcing the states, specifically Indiana, to abide by the Constitution and not unreasonably seize through forfeiture things that don't have anything to do with the case that they're adjudicating to fund, let's say, police departments or, drug interdiction programs, whatever. So I thought that was a fantastic ruling, and she was one of the people who wrote on it. And when I read what she wrote, it was hard for me to believe she's a Democrat, but that was a unanimous ruling from the Supreme Court. Do you see them doing the same thing they did with the travel ban? I mean, theoretically, they're going to see that this is within the president's wheelhouse. On first blush, anyone who's looking at this and doesn't have Trump derangement syndrome is going to come to the same conclusion that you came to.
Yeah, look, I think it's likely to play out much the way the travel ban case did. Presidents receive daily classified briefings about the various threats that we face, including threats along the southern border. Federal judges have no expertise in this area. They do not receive classified briefings very rarely, certainly not on a daily basis. And courts have been traditionally very reluctant to second-guess the national security decisions made by the president, although a lot of judges showed no reluctance whatsoever about doing precisely that with respect to the travel ban case. And my guess is that there will be at least one lower court judge out of all of these lawsuits who will show similarly no reluctance about doing so. I mean, that's the thing with these nationwide injunctions. I mean, you file 10 of these lawsuits, you can, if the executive branch wins 9 of them, but there's one judge out there who enters a nationwide injunction, that shuts down the program, period, so long as that injunction remains in effect, which is why it's such an extraordinary type of relief. And Justice Thomas has questioned its constitutionality, but so far he's the only justice that has questioned the constitutionality of nationwide injunctions.
Okay, so you actually went straight to my next question. This is what I was exactly going to ask you, which was, so we have this statement by Justice Thomas, and he said that at some point the Supreme Court is going to have to weigh in on whether or not appellate courts can issue nationwide injunctions against the executive branch.
Right.
Do you think this might be that intersection at which they would have to mention that, because it keeps happening?
Yeah, it might be. Look, it is. There have been nationwide injunctions entered before. There was one, for instance, that a judge in Texas did against the Obama administration, preventing him from putting DAPA into effect. That was the follow-on program to the DACA policy that the president had already put into effect. So it's not unheard of, but the number of nationwide injunctions and the variety of nationwide injunctions has just exploded since President Trump has taken over. And normally, you sit in the district court, you're in a particular jurisdiction, you're supposed to enter injunctions that provide relief to the parties who are before you. Your rulings are not generally supposed to go beyond your jurisdiction. Class actions are kind of the exception to that rule. And normally the Supreme Court likes to see different judges all around the country looking at issues, and these, their reasoning sort of percolates their way up. If you have one judge who enters a nationwide injunction and prevents any other court from doing something to the contrary, it kind of short-circuits that process and deprives the courts of appeals and certainly the Supreme Court from the benefit of the wisdom of hearing from a number of other judges. So it's certainly a bad practice, and Justice Thomas is perfectly careful, perfectly prepared to say, well, for the first 150 years of our nation's history or more, there was never a nationwide injunction, and he thinks that that it may indeed be unconstitutional to have that practice now. Maybe this will be the case in which they take it up. If the pace of nationwide injunctions continues the way it's been going, they will eventually have to rule on the issue. And if they don't, Congress will, or the Judicial Conference will have to rewrite the rules for when judges can enter nationwide injunctions. This cannot continue.
Yeah, I would just like to see it just for the main crux of it is that the judiciary is supposed to be separate and not really impacted by the winds of politics. Now, I know that it's impossible to have them be completely in a bubble or a silo away from the everything that happens in the political world. But the idea that we even saw an argument, you probably remember, the president said that you've got these Obama judges, and then Justice Roberts came out and said there aren't Obama judges, there aren't, there are only justices and judges. And Trump replied back, yeah, actually there are. Like, these guys work on behalf of one political party. They're not really there to interpret law or protect the rights of citizens who find themselves in these cases, and they're, coming up at the appellate level. And so I think there's something to be said for them crushing this, especially now, like not waiting until there's a President Kamala Harris or Bernie Sanders, but doing it now, because the Democrats would never stand for this. Like, they'd have their military arm Antifa out smashing skulls and beating up grannies if we continually usurp the will of the voters by having conservative judges rule whatever we wanted. I mean, put the shoe on the other foot. This is unfathomable to see Democrats allowing this.
Yeah, well, look, both the president and the Chief Justice, they had their points to make. So the Chief Justice saw the judiciary, by his lights, being attacked, and he wanted to be able to say, look, we take an oath, we're life tenured, we leave our politics at the door, we're supposed to provide equal justice under law, we take an oath to uphold the Constitution, not to uphold the whims of the Republican or Democratic Party. And he is right about that. That is what judges are supposed to do. But, of course, you get some judges who have a very difficult time doing that, or maybe they don't have a difficult time. They just don't want to do it. They want to be political activists wearing robes. And there are some judges out there on the left and a few on the right who do that. So the president was, of course, correct to say, look, Mr. Chief Justice, this is all aspirational, but I live in the real world, and the fact of the matter is these cases are being filed in the Ninth Circuit for a reason, and that is because there are an awful lot of activist judges in the Ninth Circuit, and that's why the Ninth Circuit is historically and perennially the most reverse circuit in the nation. And, they're both right. I mean, there is no question that the challenges are picking their jurisdictions very, very carefully to dramatically increase the odds that they are going to be appearing before a friendly judge who has perhaps an inflated sense of his or her own power.
So, speaking of things that are a little bit on the weird side, the president also just defunded Planned Parenthood to the tune of $60 million, which they're screaming about. They expect it to go to court, but I'm bringing it up to you because it's a really interesting thing. They're going to scream about $60 million when their profits are far and above over that, and they get $560 million from taxpayers, and that's not including the over $1 billion they get through Medicare reimbursements that they get from taxpayers. So do you see that court challenge going anywhere, or will they stick by what? Because the president has followed the rules here. It's Title IX funding, which means they can delineate how Title IX funding is sent out. They can determine which strings they want attached to it, and if you don't meet the criteria, then you just don't get the funding. Do you see that being reversed?
Yeah, I don't know enough about the laws that apply. I know that under Obamacare, the Planned Parenthood successfully filed a challenge when a state tried to cut off their Medicaid funding because of these horrific videos that were produced, and they cited to an Obamacare provision that said so long as you were a qualified provider, you were medically proficient in performing the services performed, that it's up to individuals to choose how their Medicaid dollars got spent. The Supreme Court was going to take that up. They declined to hear the case, and it led to a back and forth between Justice Thomas.
We've got the music, John, and I probably shouldn't have asked you that. But I want to say thank you for coming on today. Have a great weekend. John Malcolm, VP for the Institute for Constitutional Government. We'll be right back with more.
Can solid teamwork building principles apply to all of life? Here's Tony Dungy, author of The Soul of a Team, with today's uncommon moment.
When he was asked what made the Pittsburgh Steelers such standouts in the 1970s, Coach Chuck Noll said, "The most important thing we had was the ability to work together." Of course, if working together were easy, there wouldn't be so much written about it, and every team would be wildly successful. So what separates the truly great teams from the mediocre ones? It basically boils down to 4 simple yet highly effective principles: selflessness, ownership, unity, and larger purpose, which together form what I like to call the soul, S-O-U-L, of a team. I can assure you that these principles will hold true for any business, nonprofit, church, or other type of organization.
Tony Dungy, best-selling author of The Soul of a Team, from Tyndale House. More at CoachDungy.com.
There are many ways you can listen to the shows of Urban Family Talk. One of those ways is through our very own app. Whether you have an iPhone or an Android, just go to the App Store and search for Urban Family Talk. You'll have immediate access to 24-hour programming as well as the podcast for each show. You'll be able to tune in no matter where you are. Speaking of tuning in, we have our own channel on another radio app called Tune In. Cool, right? Urban Family Talk is everywhere. Just download the app and take us wherever you go.
Miki Addison.
My challenge to you was to evangelize your children and to disciple your children and to give them the truth, because if you don't do that, then we have a culture that's waiting in the wings to disciple your kids and to make converts. And so I really believe and I expect the Lord to really set some people free today.
The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference is coming June 20th through 22nd. Learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
This is Fox on Justice. The question before the Supreme Court is about a question. Is this person a citizen of the United States? The Trump administration wants that answered by people who fill out the 2020 census. The Supreme Court has agreed to take up the issue of whether they have the right to ask this question. It's a question that gets right at the heart of the fight over illegal immigration.
The citizenship question must be removed from the 2020 census.
Opponents like Liz Ouyang of the group New York Counts calls it racism, designed to scare people away from filling out the form. Supporters like J. Christian Adams with the Public Interest Legal Foundation considers that fear-mongering.
They're afraid that we're going to get a better handle on the problem of illegal immigration.
The census is required by the Constitution, with the count used to determine how federal spending is doled out to the states. The Supreme Court is expected to hear arguments in April. With Fox on Justice, Hank Weinblum, Fox News.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
You can't put a false report of a guy being injured and he's not injured. You have to have an actual excuse. That's an NBA rule. I think an NBA rule, if you come out with you can't put a false report of saying someone is hurt and they're not.
What you say, Chuck?
No, see.
Bogus 3,500.
Put up a false report.
Well, you know what?
Truer words have never been said.
Looks to me like a good time to take a break.
Oh, man. I tell you what, though, man.
Okay, all right.
There must be some good sandwiches at Subway. You gotta go out there at 3, 4 in the morning to get them.
Go grab beef.
Ooh, Chad, what they got on them
what
sandwiches?
What am I supposed to do with them, man?
Chad, what's on them sandwiches? Bologna? Bologna, government
turkey
cheese?
Honey mustard?
My point was.
Well taken.
Okay, so you just heard a bunch of stars on, well, they're former NBA players, and it was Charles Barkley and a bunch of other people. And they were sitting up discussing some actual sporting issue, like something to do with sports. And you guys know I have no idea. I don't watch ESPN, and it's, not a boycott thing. I just don't watch it because I don't care about sports unless someone I know is playing. So if it's not my husband or one of the kids, I just don't care to watch. And I gotta say, when I heard the audio, I just couldn't get over how comical they found the whole situation. The fact that Jussie Smollett paid with a check, the fact that he had them go out and buy all of the materials. It was almost like, one of those consultant relationships where you say, I hear that you stage fake race attacks. And the person that you call is like, yeah, we do. It's something that we do. We'll go buy the actual materials for you. We'll even send the fake letter, if you want us to send a hoax letter, a racially charged hoax letter. You tell us some general aspects of the target. We'll send it for you. We'll make it look authentic. and here's what we charge for that. And we accept checks and PayPal payments. And so it's almost like that's how it went down. And some of the things that they're now coming out with in these press conferences about how he, literally paid with a check, how they went to a hardware store and bought the rope for the noose and all of that. They cut the pieces of the letters out of pieces of newspaper and glued them on in the traditional, like, crazy letter from, some whack job. They did all of that. And so now we've gotten to a point where a lot of people are mocking Jussie Smollett. And the other cast members of the show, Empire, have actually thrown such a fit that they want him written out of all of there are 2 episodes left. So the Fox, the television station, has complied. They're writing Jussie Smollett out. And people are mocking him. The only people he still has in his corner are like Don Lemon, who can't seem to bring himself to truly out and out condemn this guy. And, some others who they're not really going to defend him, but they're not going to crush him either. Like they just seem like they want to just let it go. They want it to go away. So I want to get back to the phones, and it's your turn to call in if you want. 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. And we'll talk about anything, whatever you want to talk about. And we'll also talk about this New Jersey Senate bill that they just passed that would keep President Trump off the 2020 ballot. This is so, ludicrous. They want to keep President Trump off the ballot unless he releases his tax returns. And since they can't get it done at the congressional level, they want to get it done at the state level. And basically, he wouldn't be on the ballot in different states, which would severely harm his chances of winning, right? So let's go to Tony. Tony, thank you for calling the show today.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, good. I just had a question about government shutdowns. Well, we hear about it. It's happened a few times, but I've always wondered who decides what gets shut down.
Well, it depends on which continuing resolution. Since we no longer do regular budgetary process and regular order, what happens is there's a continuing resolution that covers funding for, this many agencies, 5 or 6 agencies. And so when that continuing resolution is not passed through Congress, if Congress can't agree, then it becomes a government shutdown. Or if they agree but the president refuses to sign, again, government shutdown. So that's how it's determined. It's really, you have to look at the actual budget itself, the continuing resolution itself, and see what agencies are covered, and that's how you can tell what will be shut down. This time it was just 5 or 6 agencies comprising about 24%, something like that, of the federal government. And it was just the hill the president picked to fight for his funding for the wall. And he felt it was appropriate in that continuing resolution because that one included Homeland Security, and the border invasion is being handled by the Department of Homeland Security and Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. Let's go to Eric in Arizona. Hey, Eric, thank you for calling the show today.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm actually from Arkansas.
Awesome. Thanks for calling in.
But I wanted to comment on what you said earlier about Bernie Sanders not getting the approval of the Democrats this time for the presidential election.
Yeah.
If he's really an independent, why should he not run as an independent?
I agree. I think they should force him to run as an independent. Now, the reason he doesn't want to run as one is because the independent party apparatus will not provide him a means by which he can win the presidency. It will just split the vote for the Democrats and independents. Independents siphon votes off of the Republicans primarily, but in this case, it would siphon votes off of the Democrats because he really is, he's on the left. So, Eric in Arkansas, happy Friday to you. Thanks for calling the show. Let's go to Michael in Mississippi. Hey, Michael, thanks for calling the show.
Hi, Stacy.
Hello.
I just wanted to comment on how much of a shame it is that the left-wing media has been trying to paint the Republican Party as this outlandish thing, and they're trying to call themselves the party of diversity. But if you would just take a minute to look at the Republican Party, it's a party that welcomes, it has people who listen to AFR, and it has KKK members. And we all support the same candidate, and it doesn't matter if you're a racist or a Christian, you can aim for the same goal. And I just want to say, it's
yeah,
amazing
you know
to
what,
see
Michael?
all
Zip
the
that up.
the
You are
same
not
thing.
going to get away with that on my show. No, you're trying to basically come on and make a statement that's kind of a backhanded insult by saying that it's KKK members and racists in the Republican Party, but you're ignoring the people on the left who assume I can't be in a book club because I'm black, or they assume that somehow I must be a single mom because I'm black. Can I just talk to you for a second, Michael, about how many times I've had some liberal Bernie Sanders supporter talk down to me because I'm black? It's the Democrats who have a problem with race. It's the Democrats who were in the KKK to begin with. It's the Democrats who were the purveyors of slavery and didn't want to see it ended because it was profitable for them. But let's just talk about the modern racism that we see from Democrats. I'm sorry, Michael. How many black friends do you have? Do you live in a black neighborhood? Do your kids go to a racially integrated school? Do you live in a gated community, Michael? Or are you one of those people who you're in a union and your union doesn't have any black people in it? Don't get me started. Racism is not a political issue. It's an issue of the heart. A person who holds hatred in their heart for their brother or their sister is ignoring the innate beauty of that other created being, because we are all created in the image of God. And your idea that you thought you'd call in here on a Friday and slide that little bit of backhanded slappage trying to insinuate that I'm with a bunch of racists, you're not going to get away with that today, baby. You can't play that on my program. So first of all, don't call back. And second of all, what you should be really doing is addressing the hatred in your own heart. You hate Donald Trump. You hate Donald Trump supporters. And the only thing you've got to assault us with is this idea that we're racist because you don't have any fresh ideas. You're supporting a party that actually enslaves black people in the plantations of inner cities where they're stuck. Poor educational outcomes, elementary schools with no air conditioning, and lots of Planned Parenthood buildings to kill off all the unwanted weeds in the black community. You're supporting that. Explain to me, Michael, how you're going to get to the judgment seat and talk to God about racism in the Republican Party instead of talking to him about how you supported abortion, how you supported the dismemberment of babies in the womb, how you support post-birth abortion, how you don't believe that babies, when they're black, have every right to exist the same as any baby that might be white. You have a problem with racism, not Republicans. Don't try me and don't try that on this good Christian air. Thank you, though. Thank you for getting me riled up. Good for the Friday. Good to get the blood pumping on a Friday. Happy Friday to you. And I hope, what I sincerely hope for you is that you find your way into a church populated by many, many different skin tones, because the permanent tan doesn't determine anything. Ethnic diversity means nothing. It's actually the heart that matters. And I hope you get your heart right. I hope you get into church. I hope someone that is loving and a true disciple of God and Jesus Christ will bring you into the family, and that you'll learn to start looking at people for their character and what they have on their heart, as opposed to staring at their skin color and making snap judgments about them the way you seem to be doing with Trump supporters. Oh, I just, not today, Zerg, not today. I want to listen to this little bit of audio from Secretary of State Pompeo. He's talking about this ISIS bride and how she's a terrorist and how she's not coming back to America. And he does a little bit just at the end of it about the foreign policy aims of having our troops still in the Middle East in certain portions where we're crushing ISIS. And then we'll go back to the phones. Let's listen to number 5.
I don't get the heartstrings deal. This is a woman who inflicted enormous risk on American soldiers, on American citizens. She's a terrorist. She's not coming back. President Trump made clear that she wasn't coming back. She's not a U.S. citizen. She is not entitled to U.S. citizenship, and she's not coming back to our country to pose a threat.
Has the strategy changed in terms of pulling the troops out of Syria and Afghanistan even?
No, the tactical decision the president made in Syria to take the 2,000 uniformed military personnel out of Syria remains. We're now literally on the doorstep. We could be hours away from taking away the last square inch of ISIS-controlled territory in Syria. Now liberated millions of people in Iraq and Syria. President Trump knows the threat from ISIS remains. It's a global threat. We're going to stay at it, but our tactics in Syria have changed.
So we're literally moments away from completely obliterating ISIS in Syria. And everyone is mainly on this whole idea that we just have to have so many thousands of troops there. How about if we allow the people with the military training, the military minds, and the people who really know what's going on there to make the decision about how many troops should be there, instead of just knee-jerk reacting and saying, we have to have troops there, we have to have troops there. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to do anything in the Middle East. I'm sick of this idea that our blood has to be spilled over there in order for things to go well. How about if we just crush the enemy wherever we find it, complete the mission as stated, and then pull out and get on with our lives? That's what I'd like to see us do. All right, Scott in Tennessee, thank you so much for calling the show.
Hi, Stacy.
Hi.
Did you get a good breath after that call with
I'm
that guy?
still trying to get a
down
little breath in. Yeah, I'm still trying. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. It's just not today. Oh my gosh.
No. I'm with you. You're totally right. Hey, I just want to make a comment about this ridiculous Empire Star and all this stuff that's going on with this. The left is making such a big deal about truth, and they just can't abide by all the deception that's been going on. The first time it's ever happened, all they're about is deception in life. Look at Covington. Look at Judge Moore. Look at so many things the media across the country spent hours, days, weeks going after nothing but falsehoods, even after it was proven false. Oh, they're all about continuing that. But yet here's this thing which is way less important than, getting a senator elected to Congress. Wait a minute. Now they're so righteous, and they're all of the left is all coming out about truth. It's really hypocritical beyond belief. There's not one other example of them ever being truthful in the media. It's just pretty mind-blowing that we're giving them that much attention. And they're faking it. They're faking this whole thing. I wouldn't be surprised the whole thing is a scam to try to give themselves credibility.
I mean, so first of all, Scott, you're dead on. And second of all, I hate it too, which is, so part of what you're talking about here, that's why I'm not talking about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez as much anymore. I'm trying to not give her so much breathing room and so much space. And it's like, blowing oxygen into a fire. It's only going to get bigger. And it's the same thing with these hoaxes, except the retractions don't nearly match the actual initial media blitz on these things. And so what I'm hoping is that, like you've just articulated there, that we can suck the air out of this whole idea that there's some violent movement by Trump supporters to do anything to anyone. Trump supporters are too busy going to work and paying their taxes and doing the things they have to do to get involved in these late night polar vortex, sandwich beatings. It's just not happening. But I want to strike a balance between covering it and not giving it too much coverage. And so it just drives me nutso that we actually have to go through this at all, because we should be fighting about the ideas. And I'm already there. It's no beginning. I'm already at the place where I now understand that the reason why we see so much vitriol from the Democrats is that failing a lot makes people angry. And if they're unwilling to leave the kind of trough that they've made for themselves, which is a trough of failure, if you're unwilling to leave the ideas that got you there, and the only thing that's left is to lie about your opponent, to attack your opponent verbally and physically, and to level the kinds of smear tactics like Republicans are all racist, or black Republicans are all, tap dancing for their masters, the kind of stuff I get in my email box. I'm an Uncle Tom. I hate myself. I hate black people, whatever. You can keep saying whatever you want to, but look at the black conservatives and how successful we are. Look at the Christians in this country doing philanthropic good works, being the hands and feet of Jesus Christ, all while keeping a smile on their face and paying their taxes and doing what needs to be done. I suggest to people who think we're all racist, okay, fine, we are. Now what? What are you going to do about yourself? What are you going to do about the situation you're in and making yourself successful? That's hour one of the show. We'll be back with hour two right after these messages from onenewsnow.com. Stay there.
And there is no doubt in your mind what motivated this attack.
I could only go off of their words. I mean, who says empire, this MAGA country, ties a noose around your neck and pours bleach on you, and this is just a friendly fight? I will never be the man that this did not happen to. I am forever changed. And I don't subscribe to the idea that everything happens for a reason, but I do subscribe to the idea that we have the right and the responsibility to make something meaningful.
For American Family News, I'm Chris Woodward. $60 million a year. That's how much Planned Parenthood stands to lose in a rule finalized by the Trump administration today. Under the so-called Protect Life rule, no Title X funding can go to family planning centers that perform or refer for abortions. As a result, Planned Parenthood will either need to comply or change their abortion-centered practices. Mallory Quigley of Susan B. Anthony List says it's been a long time coming.
This is an administrative effort from President Trump to stop taxpayer funding of abortion, particularly the use of Title X family planning taxpayer funds being used at abortion facilities, chief among them Planned Parenthood. So the rule's been finalized today and will very shortly go into effect, and Planned Parenthood stands to lose $60 million of taxpayer funding if they refuse to comply with it. So this is fantastic news for pro-life taxpayers, for unborn children, and for really the nation.
SBA List expects Planned Parenthood to file a lawsuit.
But the good news is that similar regulations that were in litigation earlier in the 90s were upheld by the Supreme Court in 1991 in Russ versus Sullivan. So the government has a great case here.
The leaders of 29 conservative organizations have asked new U.S. Attorney General William Barr to investigate bias in American social media giants. Steve Jordahl reports.
No one was quite sure what Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey meant when he said this recently on a Sam Harris podcast.
I don't believe that we can afford to take a neutral stance anymore. I do believe that we should optimize for impartiality.
But AFA President Tim Wildman thinks it's industry speak for we're not going to put up with your biblical worldview on our platforms anymore.
They really don't like that. If you're critical or anything LGBT, you're in risk of being put in timeout by Facebook.
He's seen the censoring of social conservatives and Christian thought firsthand and says it could really hurt a ministry.
You put a social branding on them as something they're not. For instance, all these social platforms have shut down AFA, so they must be a real hate group. So that impacts your ability to communicate your message to the public, to fundraise.
Media Research Center has coordinated a letter from Wildman and 29 other conservatives to Attorney General William Barr containing multiple examples of bias and censorship, and asked if the Justice Department couldn't look into antitrust, conspiracy, and collusion charges. Spokesman Dan Gaynor.
Even liberals complain about a lot of the behaviors of these social media companies. And while we're trying very hard to work with them, they're moving ahead and doing some fairly significant things.
I'm Steve Jordahl.
Singer R. Kelly has been charged with aggravated sexual abuse after decades of lurid rumors and allegations that the R&B star was sexually abusing women and underage girls. R. Kelly is 52 years old. Prosecutors say they expect him to be in bond court tomorrow. Robert Kraft, owner of the New England Patriots, has been charged with solicitation of prostitution at a Florida spa. It's part of a larger crackdown on sex trafficking in the area around Palm Beach County. Jupiter Police Chief Daniel Kerr said Kraft will not receive special treatment.
He's being charged with the same offenses as the others, and that is soliciting another to commit prostitution.
According to police, there is video of the incident. There were 25 people charged for soliciting prostitution from the Orchids of Asia spa in Jupiter. In final news this hour, the producers of the television show Empire say Jussie Smollett's character will be removed from the final 2 episodes of this season. The announcement today comes after Smollett was charged with felony disorderly conduct for filing a false police report. Police say he faked a racist and anti-homosexual attack because he was unhappy with his salary and wanted to promote his career. Empire has 9 episodes left to air in its 5th season. The last 2 episodes are still in development. Find more news at wennewsnow.com.
Laura Perry.
She refused to use the male pronouns or call me Jake. So what that did for me is that she didn't know at the time. That was like a tether to reality. God never let me forget who I was. And that was a radical thought to me, and I did not want to hear it at first. When I first heard it, it really kind of made me angry.
The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference is coming June 20th through the 22nd. Learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Mr. Smollett is the one that orchestrated this crime. Bogus police reports cause real harm.
President Trump says an Alabama woman who joined ISIS in Syria will not be allowed to re-enter the U.S.
There has been no Russian collusion except by Hillary Clinton and Steele and all of those folks that were using the Russians to get dirt.
The idea that President Trump needed to collude with Russia in order to beat Hillary Clinton is frankly laughable.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Welcome to the program. Thank you for being with us today. I'm so excited to have Erielle Davidson, frequent guest of the show and good friend of mine. I love chatting with her. She's going to come on and talk to us about news of the day, of which there is so much. I first want to just start off right now on this segment with a Democrat, and you're going to hear in his voice, he's got a lot of disgust going on about Bernie Sanders not being a Democrat, but running on the Democratic ticket. And my sincere hope is that for people who find themselves in no man's land because they don't find themselves, agreeing with everything in the Republican Party platform, of which you first have to know what's in it before you can disagree with it. Just calling it racist isn't good enough anymore. You have to step up. You have to raise your game, get at our level, know what both platforms say, then make a choice. That's a choice I can respect. If you have no idea what the Republican Party platform is, how can you say you don't agree with it? How can you call all the people in it racist if you have no idea what it says? So here he is. He's talking about Sanders not being a Democrat and not representing his ideals. And how can he run on the D side? It's number one.
I don't understand why Bernie Sanders, who does not want to become a member of the Democratic Party.
He vowed he would run, and if he wins, reside as a Democrat.
Run as a Democrat. We've asked him on a continuous basis, if, in fact, you want to be the Democratic nominee, you should be a Democrat. If you're not a Democrat, you should not run. He should run as an independent. He's not a Democrat. So to me, I wouldn't allow a Republican to run as a Democrat or for the Democratic nominee.
You don't think he should be allowed to run in the Democratic Party?
I don't think he should be a Democrat. I think that he should say if he wants to be a Democrat, he should register in the Democratic Party. And then you can talk about running and to be my representative. I want a Democrat to be my representative as President of the United States.
What's wrong with that? Like, does that not make sense? If you're not going to have somebody actually running as the party that their ticket is for, then what's the point of having parties at all? So if that's what they're looking for, if they're looking for just any old person, which they're already having problems with any old person. Look at AOC. Look at the anti-Semite that they have running around, and she's wearing the Islamic sign of oppression for women every day into the halls of our legislative body. I mean, these are important places that she's running around with that headscarf on, and that is the symbol, the international symbol of oppression of women, is that they're forced to wear that headscarf and cover up their hair and their necks because some man might get excited over seeing their hair. And so, again, victim oppression, they have to wear that. And she goes around, spends a lot of her time talking about horrible, just making the most horrible anti-Semitic comments, and that's supposed to represent Democrats? Separate them off from the herd. Just because they have constituency groups that propel them into those offices, they should not hold committee positions. These are not people you want in charge of important things. Yeah, they got elected. They're duly elected. There's nothing you can do about it. But to leave them and in their places without addressing their anti-Semitism, to give them power by putting them on committees with influence over millions of voters? No, that is where you're supposed to say, not today. No, thank you. I don't want that for my country, for my political party. I mean, have some pride about what you're voting for. Have something that you can say, I don't support all of it, but I can at least say we're not pushing anti-Semitism. Can you say that as a Democrat right now? Not with these ones that you got running around. They're anti-Semitic. They're speaking at groups and organizations that hate Jewish people. And Jewish people are a part of the fabric of this country. Jewish people are Americans too. And they have every right to expect that no matter what political persuasion you're coming from, you're not going to promote and advance the cause of wiping them out and eliminating their country of origin, which is the nation state of Israel. That shouldn't be a partisan aim. That shouldn't be something that I can only be, against anti-Semitism, if I'm a Republican or no, how about if you're just a good human being? How about if you just have a few morals about yourself? I'm not even going to talk about how many you got, not trying to put anything on you or anything, but do you have any morals about yourself? Do you care about anything besides taking money from rich people and giving it to yourself? I mean, you got to have some standards. So that just, I feel like it's kind of driving me a little bit crazy that we're not seeing more Democrats push back on this anti-Semitism that is just, it's all out in public for everyone to see. So pivoting over to the botched bureaucratic coup, because we can thank God that even though we're not seeing people being prosecuted as of yet who are participating in this attempt to unseat a duly elected president, it's not working. Their idea was that President Trump would have already been impeached by now, that the Mueller report would have come out, showed him as a Russian colluder, and that whether it was made up or true or not, they didn't care, and that he would have already been removed from office to make sure that Ruth Bader Ginsburg could be replaced by a suitable, progressive, Marxist, on the way to communism Democrat. But that's not happened yet. So we have things to celebrate, but it's frustrating because we know the Mueller report is slated, rumors have it, everyone's reporting, it's coming out next week. And so this is actually a mashup of the CBS reporter talking about how Mueller likely won't charge anyone with Russian collusion. Now, later in the show, I have a little bit of audio for you. It's enraging, but you got to hear it, from NBC and CBS promising that the Russia investigation will continue regardless of the Mueller report findings. So they don't care what the Mueller report says. Remember, they said, just let the report continue. Just let the investigation continue. We want assurances. We want a bill that President Trump won't end the Mueller investigation. Well, notice they're not talking about that anymore because they already know it's coming and it's not going to be what they want. So they're just going to keep investigating him into oblivion. They'll still be investigating him when he's gone on to be with the Lord and his grandkids are running for office. They'll still be investigating whether Donald Trump was a Russian asset, is what they're fond of calling him over at CNN and MSNBC. So here's number 3. This is CBS.
We haven't seen a narrative essentially for everyone wrapping it all together and connecting the dots, essentially outlining the criminal conspiracy or collusion, if you will. Do you expect that?
I do not. At this point, I do not think that they are going to charge anyone with a conspiracy between Russia or anyone in the campaign. There have been other people who have run afoul of other laws, but at this point, it is not my expectation that anyone will be charged with conspiracy or, as people like to call it, collusion.
Okay, so conspiracy and collusion are not the same thing, first of all. She said conspiracy or, as some people like to call it, collusion. So first of all, what is conspiracy? The definition of conspiracy is the act of conspiring together, an agreement among conspirators, a group of conspirators. Conspiracy is not the same as what she said, what other people like to call collusion. So what's the definition of collusion? Because words matter. Collusion is a secret agreement between 2 or more parties to limit open competition by deceiving, misleading, or defrauding others of their legal rights. So they're not the same thing. So I don't know what she's talking about or what J school she went to or what kind of dictionary she has access to on all of her smart devices, but it isn't this or that when they're not direct synonyms. In other words, she probably should look up before she goes back on television. So now let's talk about why we should at least have some, maybe a little bit of joy over the fact that this is not actually happening the way they keep saying it should have happened. So I found this piece over at the American Spectator. And, first of all, I know a lot of us, especially those of us who are, heavy news consumers, are really disappointed that Andrew McCabe is being treated like some kind of celebrity, like he just won, the latest series of Survivor or something like that, or like he's the new Bachelor, instead of him being in a federal penitentiary. He has committed perjury on multiple occasions. He participated in an attempt to alter the outcome of a national election. He colluded with other rogue bureaucrats to remove a duly elected president from power. But the silver lining, the reason why we can all kind of, do our Snoopy dance and go on into the weekend with no issues, besides the knowledge that God is in control, is that Donald Trump's still in office and Hillary Clinton is still running around in $12,000 house suits, trying to convince everyone that she's actually going to mount a credible assault on the presidency in 2020. That's where the that's where we get to rejoice, and it's also where we see the level of Trump derangement syndrome. It just keeps ratcheting up. Instead of decreasing with time, it gets more and more palpable for people who participated in this or people who wanted to see this go through, because it was a failure. They had everything lined up. It should have fallen like a row of dominoes. They should have been able to pull this off, but they weren't. And that's why we see people just losing their minds. So, you know, you got McCabe going on 60 Minutes. He's all over the media. People are treating him like he's a very credible, interesting person that we should all listen to. And we know the reality. If Hillary Clinton had been elected president, very few people would have known who Andrew McCabe was. The outrageous corruption that characterized his career and the crimes of his co-conspirators would have been covered up by Hillary Clinton and her administration, and the media would have insisted with pleasure. You know, when someone says, I'm at your service, they would have been completely at the service of the Clinton administration in covering this up. So enduring his celebrity right now is a small price to pay for avoiding the nightmare of President Hillary Clinton. President Hillary Clinton is something we will never, ever have to hear, thanks in part to Donald Trump literally eviscerating her credibility and telling her she'd be in jail. The things that he did on the campaign trail and the prayers of the saints that kept that thing going, that's why we don't have to worry about a Hillary Clinton presidency. So, you know, sometimes you when you're looking for the silver lining, you find it's not just a lining, it's a full-blown, you know, platinum and gold-plated lining, and it's fantastic and it's worth a lot, and you need to really be grateful that you have it. And that is where we have to kind of reside. We have to get in that spot and sit in it. And I'm talking about also truth ultimately prevailing. Yes, many, many millions of us know that Andrew McCabe is a liar and a subverter of justice. One day, everyone will know it. But right now, we have to be satisfied with what we can get. Now, pains are going to be taken to bring the truth to light about Andrew McCabe and all of his co-conspirators. GOP Senator Lindsey Graham was actually on Face the Nation on CBS, and he said this: we're going to find out what happened here, and the only way I know to find out is to call the people in under oath and find out through questioning who's telling the truth, because the underlying accusation is beyond stunning. He goes on. There's an allegation by the acting FBI director at the time that the deputy attorney general was basically trying to do an administrative coup and take the president down through the 25th Amendment process. So we see Rosenstein is due to, leave his position at the end of next month. We don't know what kind of, screw turning and, muscling he performed to get to stay there as long as he's staying, or if it was a political calculation by the president that firing him would only bring another special counsel and put, the continuance of the Trump agenda in jeopardy. And so we have to kind of just take it at the face value. He's going to be there until the end of next month, and that's all we can do. Now, Graham actually made these comments on CBS because Andrew McCabe claimed that Rod Rosenstein raised the possibility of invoking the 25th Amendment. Now, this is a serious, serious thing. If it was raised with any validity, then you would see a natural process by which a president would have been removed. But the idea that it was discussed as a means to remove him simply because he was a part of the opposition party to where they sit, now that sounds a lot like collusion. Remember, we just went over that definition? You're trying to deprive someone of their rights, their lawful rights. The president has been duly elected, and it is his right to serve out the remainder of his term without being removed by someone simply because they don't like the political party that he's in. So, we're going into the weekend. You kind of have to put it in your toolkit and remember, just for quick, rapid recall, that Andrew McCabe lied multiple times to federal investigators. That was the official finding of a February 2018 39-page report by the DOJ, Office of Inspector General. They found McCabe, then deputy director of the FBI, lacked candor in answering questions, and the referral for further action went to the DOJ. That's why we don't give him any credibility. We'll put up with him, but we know who he is. When we get back, we'll have Erielle Davidson. Stay there.
Here's Walker Wildman,
for Redeem Clean laundry products.
Not only do you get a great product and you get to obviously clean your clothes, get the stains out and use a multi-surface cleaner to clean your countertops and use the dryer sheets. You're doing all of this and the money's going to support the work of American Family Association.
Redeem Clean laundry products were developed by AFA supporters Len Ingram and Jim Duncan to assist in funding the mission of the American Family Association. Redeem Clean products work as well as or better than other products on the market. They're environmentally safe, biodegradable, and they're made right here in the United States.
The great thing about Redeem Clean is not only is the product great, but it goes to support a great cause, and that is the work of American Family Association.
For clean laundry and a cleaner society, it's Redeem Clean. Visit redeemclean.afastore.net.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
For decades, most people knew Bono as a musician with the group U2 and a social activist. But today, many of his fans would be surprised to hear him promote some of the benefits of capitalism. At a World Economic Forum, he made this observation. Capitalism is not immoral, it's amoral. It requires our instruction. Capitalism has taken more people out of poverty than any other ism. But it is a wild beast, and if not tamed, can chew up a lot of people along the way. As you can see, he isn't a complete supporter of the free market, but he is willing to give some appreciation for what capitalism has done to reduce extreme poverty. Hugh Welcher, who is the executive director of the Institute for Faith, Work, and Economics, begins his essay with this quote from Bono. He then goes on to document something I've talked about with a number of economists and theologians on the Point of View radio talk show. Capitalism has been able to raise more than 1 billion people around the world out of extreme poverty. On one of my radio programs, I quoted a Barna survey of Americans. 3/4 of those surveyed believed that world poverty had increased. Only 7% thought it decreased. Scott Todd, in his book Hope Rising, reminds us that in 1981, a majority of the developing world's population lived in extreme poverty. That percentage has been cut by more than half. Hugh Welcher reminds us that in a recent Gallup poll, it shows that a majority of young people favor socialism over capitalism. The increased visibilities of members of Congress who openly describe themselves as socialists suggest that the percentage of young people embracing socialism might increase. These young people need to pay attention to Bono and the World Economic Statistics that demonstrate the power of a free market to relieve poverty. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You can download episodes of Stacy on the Right from the podcast page on AFR.net or UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Hey, welcome back to the program. I want to make a little caveat to the rant that I engaged in at the end of last hour, where we had someone call in and insinuate that the only diversity on the Republican Party is found in the fact that we have KKK members and racists and et cetera, et cetera. I want to make clear that it's not racist to live in an area that's not racially diverse. So if you live in a rural area or any area really that's not racially diverse, that's not racist in and of itself. And that's not what I was insinuating. What I'm insinuating is what I know to be true about a lot of liberals who live in suburban areas, is that they enact policies and do things to keep racial diversity down, because it's not really racial diversity, it's socioeconomic diversity. So the comments that I made to him were very specific because he was a liberal trying to call in and smear conservatives and Trump supporters on this good Christian radio station, and I wasn't going to have it without calling him out on his own innate racism that he engages in as a liberal. And I'm not speaking from what I've read, I'm speaking from what I've lived. I'm not speaking from what I've heard about on another show. I'm speaking about what liberals have told me with their own mouths. And I'm absolutely not calling anybody a racist besides that guy. And it doesn't have anything to do with people who live in racially homogenous areas. That's not the point that I was attempting to make. So I just want to make sure that I'm clear on that. Erielle Davidson is a senior contributor for the Federalist and fan favorite here on Stacy on the Right. Happy Friday, Erielle. Thanks for joining in today.
Thanks for having me, Stacy. Happy Friday.
You know, okay, so there's so much going on. I really want to get your take on this whole Jussie Smollett thing, because now the Chicago Police Department is trying to make it seem as if Jussie did something to insult the city of Chicago, when the real target of what he did was Trump supporters and President Trump.
Right. I mean, I think what it's done also, which is really the awful repercussions of it, is it actually makes it harder for people who are truly the victims of hate crime to come forward and report them. I think what it does is it trivializes actual suffering that people go through. I mean, to feign the level of suffering that he did is just completely amoral, almost sociopathic. I don't know if you caught his interview, Stacy, on national television, where he really sort of talked down and lectured about, how Trump's America had morphed into something horrible and ugly. And meanwhile, in the back of his head, he had to be thinking to himself, this is all something I fabricated. This is all a lie. This is all fake. What I want to point out, more importantly, though, again, is that he's really cheapened the experiences of people who have actually gone through something really horrible. And that to me is a huge problem. So I have a lot of resentment and animosity towards someone like that who makes up, whoever makes up any kind of false accusation and then tries to use it to win or earn sympathy points. I think one of the big things that Smollett's story has pointed out is that, we celebrate victimhood in our society now, but that's the ultimate currency. That's where power comes from. And that's a huge problem. That doesn't raise a strong generation of young thinkers, right? So I think that it shows a lot. It reflects poorly on our society as well.
Well, and can I just say, Erielle, because you make an excellent point about the currency of victimhood. So now we're coming to find out that this whole episode, starting with the letter, because I assumed that this was all around the polar vortex, middle of the night subway sandwich run, and that was the story. But the fact is, he'd attempted to initiate sympathy for himself as a victim by having the same two dudes who did the attack, that he paid to do the attack, do a letter for him. The letter was sent in, and it didn't get the reaction he wanted. And now, even as the story unfolds, we're getting even more details. It turns out he really, really just wanted a raise. So the lesson here, unintended or intended, is that we've now raised a generation of people who believe that it is more beneficial to be the victim of a racially motivated attack than it is to simply say, look at my performance, look at the market share, look at my social media. I'd like a raise.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Instead of having a real conversation like an adult, you have to go through these horrible theatrics and involve, the resources of society. I mean, think about how much time the Chicago PD spent investigating these alleged crimes. Those are resources that could have been spent elsewhere throughout the city, right? I mean, there are people in Chicago who would appreciate the cops showing up in, 10 minutes instead of 25 minutes, 30 minutes, right? I mean, there's a lot of resources that were expended to chase down this crime that never happened, and there are actual people who might suffer as a consequence of that. That, to me, is horrific.
Well, I just think about the crime. So, there's always unsolved crime. That is, like, never going away.
Right.
But if you think about, so oftentimes when there's a crime, it's that first initial period after the reporting of the crime that is so important. It's crucial for the police department to move their detectives into action to investigate something. And when you think about the name ID of Jussie Smollett, the show Empire, if you think about the amount of resources they marshaled to try to figure out what happened to him, then you think about the other cases for regular people with no name ID that probably didn't get the full attention that they could have gotten in the very first, hours after the report that, they reported the whatever the incident was. It really begins to paint a picture of how this man robbed some people of justice because their crime just wasn't investigated in enough time, in a timely fashion, to make sure that it could get solved.
Exactly. And so that's the wasting of resources that he used in order to get himself a raise, and at the expense of, Chicago, people living in Chicago. I mean, that's awful. And I think it also, again, it says something, going back to what we were talking about before, the currency of victimhood, I think, is really real. And you're right, it's showing people that this is a practical, this could be, had it been successful, this could have been a tool that he used, and at the expense of those around him.
So I think, it's an interesting look at what happens when So he's had a history of doing this. He actually pled no contest, I guess, to doing some kind of racially motivated hoax letter, years ago. So this is something that's worked for him in the past. But I don't see, and I'm interested in your take on this, Erielle. Do you see his arrest and prosecution and the backlash that he's currently receiving? He's roundly mocked all over the place now. Do you see that as deterring other people from filing these false reports, which are really epidemic on the left since the election of Donald Trump?
Well, I think two things. I think the first thing is that he should be roundly condemned. What I've actually found to be more troubling is that people are saying, we should show forgiveness to him, that this was, a misunderstanding, or that we should be kind to him. He's in a dark place. Sure, but he's also an adult. And he made deliberate decisions that, as you point out, could have potentially harmed other people who had actually suffered crimes, right? And so in my mind, I think he's a full-fledged adult, and we should treat him as such. And he made selfish choices, and he should pay for those choices. In terms of the repercussions of, we have started to see there are a few reporters that have, at Quillette, I believe, who have pointed out pretty handily, the number of hoax hate crimes that have been taking place since Trump got elected. And there is a remarkable thread of them. And again, I'll go back to the initial point I made, which is every time that happens, it makes it more difficult for someone who's actually suffered from one to be believed, right? If we have a ton of people like Smollett coming forward and saying this happened to them when it didn't actually happen, it makes it harder for someone to come forward who it happened to legitimately and be believed. And to me, that's probably the person that will suffer the most from these types of incidents, because now you do have people sort of saying, well, every time a hate crime is reported, now people are saying, well, did it really happen? That shouldn't be the case. People shouldn't. We should always be, innocent until proven guilty. But in terms of people being challenged or thinking that a particular hate crime was a hoax, that's sad to me. That's a sad reflection of the frequency with which we've been seeing hoax crimes reported.
Yeah, and so I agree with what you're saying. And you actually made a point there about people saying we need to forgive him, or he's in a dark place, whatever. But I don't feel very forgiving towards him when he says the police say he staged the hate attack to promote his career. He says that the reason why people are, opposing his story is because they're politically motivated. He's calling it, his legal team is calling the entirety, like the remainder of the story actually coming out, an organized law enforcement spectacle. They're issuing a defiant message. Today we witnessed an organized law enforcement spectacle that has no place in the American legal system. The presumption of innocence, a bedrock in the search for justice, was trampled on at the expense of Mr. Smollett, and notably on the eve of a mayoral election. Well, we didn't hear anyone say that 2 Trump supporters wearing MAGA hats allegedly attacked Jussie Smollett. We heard that they attacked him. It was, a foregone conclusion that it happened. But now that he's under the crosshairs, he's saying he wants to be given the presumption of innocence. It's hard for me to find myself saying, he's in a dark place, we need to forgive him. He's not even ready for that. He's still operating under the assumption that we're all dupes, and we believe that these 2 Nigerian brothers who've presented a check and other evidence that he did this, that they are wrong and he's right. I tend to believe the people who bring the evidence forward.
Right, and I also think these are the new rules the left made, right? I mean, these are the new rules. There is a system now where as soon as you are accused or condemned, you are brought into the public space and then ostracized, right? And there isn't really this, in the court of public opinion, there really isn't a level of due process that's been preserved anymore. And I would argue a lot of that is because we live in a culture of accusation, condemnation that's largely been constructed by the left. Mm-hmm. And it's unfortunate, and I sort of agree with him from the sense of, I believe in due process fundamentally. As a law student, I believe in due process. I think it is a cornerstone of American society, and I am so grateful for it. And, for him to bemoan it is interesting, because I would argue that when we look at anywhere from college campuses in terms of various accusations that take place on college campuses and the kangaroo courts that have formed there, all the way up, again, to the court of public opinion, we're seeing due process eroded in all sorts of areas of American society. And I just think it's interesting to have someone who's on the left bemoan it, when I would say a lot of the left sort of cultural movement has been about eradicating due process, about how accusations hold more weight than finding the truth. And that's been a lot of what's driven the left culture war, is that we live in a society of accusations. We don't hunt for the truth any longer. We just operate on accusations. And so it's pretty rich to me that he's complaining about that, because these are the new rules that the left is using.
Yeah, it's their rules, but I noticed that when their rules are deployed against people on the right, it's like, okay, this is the way it is, accept it. When their rules come back and bite them, they seem to be like, well, you can't do that to us. We're innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah, exactly. I want to be like, we warned you. We said this was going to happen, and now it's happening. So how do you feel? Like, this is exactly why people on the right say that due process is so important. Because if God forbid, if someone accuses you of something, you want to be able to defend yourself before you're publicly shamed.
And lose all of your livelihood and everything, which it's funny because without a conviction, they're already removing Jussie Smollett from his television show. They've already cut his role and cut the number of appearances he's going to have in the last 2 episodes. His coworkers have turned against him. It really is exactly what happens on the right, only it's happening to someone who's on the left. And I don't think he likes the way it feels, but he loved it when it was Judge Kavanaugh. He loved it when it was, that we had local radio hosts here who just pushed off of the air for one tweet. When Roseanne Barr, Rosie O'Donnell, a number of Hollywood stars have tweeted out incendiary things and never had anything happen to them. Roseanne Barr kind of got to the end of her tether when it happened to her, but it's such a double standard.
I know. And it's the rule. And I think Jesse Kelly, who's also a senior contributor at the Federalist, had a really good note about this. He said, either fire everyone for every single thing, if whenever they step out of line, or don't fire anybody, but apply the same rules across the board. And I think that's actually a pretty good way to look at it. If you want these rules, apply them consistently. If you don't want them at all, then don't apply them at all, but make it be consistent. Because I think if it were consistent, there would be a lot less outrage on both sides, but it's not, right? And as you just pointed out, it's truly not.
No, it isn't. It is mildly satisfying to see it happen to someone who isn't on the right, but it doesn't change what, like you named off Jesse Kelly. He's been on the show a few times. He's a great guy, wonderful writer, and someone who his Twitter feed is interesting because he is really direct and not politically correct at all. He just tweets out whatever is on his mind, and that's where the big following comes from, right? Because people like the no nonsense delivery. They got rid of him. I think he hadn't even tweeted anything wild out. Like he was actually on a mild streak when they just were like, you're out of here. And then the backlash is what brought him back. But not everyone can marshal up a backlash. There are other people who've been booted off for no reason who have not been put back because they weren't able to get enough momentum behind, the push to get them back on.
Right. No, Jesse Kelly had the clout and the followers to be able to get back on Twitter. I mean, you're right. There was enough pushback, but after he was pulled off, he was able to gather, and enough people rose to the occasion. He didn't even contact me about it. Just as soon as I saw that he had been taken off Twitter, I was outraged. Mm-hmm. And that happens a lot more frequently. Like you pointed out, that happens a lot more frequently than we know about to people that maybe, only have 20 or 30 or 100 followers, right? Mm-hmm. And they don't have the luxury of having, a magazine behind them. So I think you totally hit the nail on the head in terms of censorship and the inconsistency of it on these platforms like Twitter, like Facebook.
Yeah, my hope is that, because they're now even going further to the left and saying, well, we can't be neutral anymore. We have to fight. But they're under the impression that these things that are being said about conservatives are true. And I want to stress again, it's not true that conservatives and Republicans and Christians on the right, evangelicals, whatever group on the right you're talking about, that it's just chalked to the brim with racists. It's just not right. Not only is it not true, you can't find evidence to support it. And I'm one of those proofs that it's not true. I'm on evangelical Christian radio right now. Like, this is American Family Association, an organization built to promote traditional family values, the biggest group of Christian radio stations in the country. And I'm sitting here with the permanent tan. Nothing's changed. They just, how does that happen if it's chock full of racists? If the listeners are racist, it doesn't happen. Erielle, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Have a great weekend.
Thanks for having me, Stacy.
Yeah, thanks for
You
coming
too.
on. Okay, we'll be back with more right after this.
Here's what you've missed on Airing the Addisons.
The former house church pastor, Brother Fu, is talking about what's going on in China. He's talking about the Chinese government, how it's made its plan clear that they want to change Christianity in China into what they would call Chinese Christianity. Fu said that there would be a retranslation or a summary of the Old Testament with some Buddhist scripture and Confucian teachings and new commentary for the New Testament.
Airing the Addisons. Weekday morning, 6 to 8 Central on Urban Family Talk.
Now, if you're offended by this story, you should be offended by any new presentation of the gospel under any ethnic covering.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But the reason we sometimes miss it is because we prefer us. There is no new gospel.
Man.
We live in a day when America's families are under attack like never before.
Buddy Smith, Senior Vice President of the American Family Association.
The war against biblical principles rages on numerous fronts. The internet, Hollywood, Washington, D.C., America's corporate boardrooms, and the list goes on. At American Family Association, we're committed to standing against the enemies of God, the enemies of your family. And we recognize it's an impossible task without God's favor and your partnership. Thank you for being faithful to pray for this ministry, to give financially, and to respond to our calls for activism. What you do on the home front is crucial to what we do on the battlefront. We praise God for your faithfulness, and may He give us many victories in the battles ahead as we work together to restore our nation's biblical foundations.
The Dean's List with Janice Dean.
Two patriotic kids from North Carolina make the Dean's List. The Roseboro Fire Department posted a picture to their Facebook page showing two neighborhood children putting their hands on their hearts as firefighters raised the flag. The kids had been riding a scooter and a hoverboard down the road when they paused, put their hands to their chests, and made the Pledge of Allegiance as the U.S. flag was being raised to full staff. An officer took the picture of the heartwarming gesture and asked for permission to post it on social media, which was promptly given by the two kids. He couldn't believe how many people responded. He also thinks these two kids could one day grow up to serve as firefighters or police officers because both jobs require workers to be respectful and professional, and they are being taught that now, so there is hope for the future. Thank you to those wonderful kids for being a great example to the community and to the Roseboro Fire Department for sharing such a wonderful show of patriotism. You all made the Dean's List. Janice Dean, Fox News.
This is Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
As for the Russia report, many legal experts say just because Robert Mueller is winding down does not mean the investigating stops, with federal prosecutors in Manhattan and elsewhere expected to follow up on pieces of the investigation.
Now, the president's legal team fully expects Mr. Trump to be cleared in all this, though the cases related to the underlying Russia investigation quite obviously will continue. If congressional Democrats are dissatisfied with what Barr submits, they could choose to subpoena the special counsel to testify.
So if they're dissatisfied, that's like saying after someone is found innocent of a crime, a bunch of people saying, I'm not satisfied with that. Let's subpoena some other people to talk about this. I know you've been found innocent in the investigation, not only the Senate Judiciary Committee investigation, but now the Mueller investigation is going to come back and find that the president is not guilty of colluding with the Russians. And the Democrats are simply going to say, I'm not satisfied with that, and that's going to fly? We're going to waste taxpayer dollars on that? Forgive me if I just sit here for a second and try to figure out how that's allowed. Are we talking about a do-over here, or are we just talking about a continuation of the same investigation until you can get the result that you want? That's called sore loser and also wasting taxpayer money. So anyway, there's this New Jersey bill. So it was the title of today's show, and I want to be specific. the New Jersey Senate passed a bill out of committee that would keep Trump off of the 2020 ballot unless he released his tax returns. They have since sent that to the full legislature, and I believe it's not going to pass. But the controversial measure would deny candidates for president and vice president a spot on the state ballot if they do not publicly release 5 of their most recent tax returns at least 50 days before the general election in 2020. The bill, if passed completely out of the legislature and signed into law by the governor, would bar the state's electors from voting for candidates for president and vice president as part of the electoral college system if they choose not to comply with the legislation. Now, I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on TV, but I smell a little bit of unconstitutionality here because it seems like it would be disenfranchising voters from voting for someone that they want to vote for based solely upon an arbitrary, condition set up by a few people. Now, obviously, the people that set it up are elected, so that's constitutional. But how is it constitutional to deny someone the ability to be on the ballot when they're obviously a candidate and they've met all of the other criteria, basically instituting new criteria specifically to bar one person from being on the ballot? That sounds unconstitutional to me. But again, I don't know. Maybe it's not unconstitutional. I don't know what the obsession is with Trump's tax returns other than they want to be able to examine his business interests. And I used to feel like, what's the big deal? Just release it. But I've come to a little bit of a different position on it, that the president, there's a reason why he doesn't want to release the returns. And that's because he's already under scrutiny for his international business relationships. And he's the first president in the modern era to have as unique of a profile business-wise as he does. All of the other presidents were coming from the political side, where a releasing of their tax returns only revealed that all they've done is be a politician and be paid to work as, for Barack Obama, as a senator, a state senator, and then a senator, and then all of the money that he earned from, book deals, etc. President Trump has international business dealings and relations through the properties that he's built around the world and the partnerships with other real estate developments, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it would also place a lot of the business interests that work with him under scrutiny. If I'm understanding what type of tax return they're looking for. So it remains to be seen whether or not they will prevail and be able to force him to do this. I know the Democrats in the Senate are also working on something similar. They want to have that happen as well. To get their hands on the president's tax returns. They're also saying that they would probably force the president to give up the tax returns, but it would have to be private. And so they'd get to review them in private, but they would then, like the American people, wouldn't get to see them. So anyway, well, I don't want to, yeah. So we touched a little bit on this idea. It's not an idea. It's the president making the announcement that they're going to take away the Title X funding from Planned Parenthood. And I mentioned this story about the David DeLayden, the court case that's been going on with it. This is kind of crazy. And this was reported February 21st, so yesterday. The Judge Christopher Hite of San Francisco Superior Court denied the requests of California Attorney General Xavier Becerra and his abortion allies to seal and shield from public viewing the video evidence to be shown in the courtroom during Sandra Merritt's upcoming preliminary hearing. Now, her preliminary hearing is scheduled for April 22nd through May 3rd of 2019, and Judge Hite will seal the video evidence after the hearing, which is such garbage. Like, the videos have already been seen. So what is this? Now we're going to seal them so nobody else can see them. Just in case anyone's following the case and they want to see the videos, they can't see them because she's going to seal them up. But Judge Hite will also allow Merritt's accusers to continue to press their charges anonymously under Doe pseudonyms. That's also garbage. They should be exposed. They're accusing her. They should be able to be named. She should be able to name her accusers. Liberty Counsel is defending Merritt against 15 felony charges brought against her by the Attorney General in connection with her undercover journalism work, which exposed Planned Parenthood's trade in baby body parts. Now, in an unprecedented move, at the request of abortion giants Planned Parenthood and the National Abortion Federation, the AG sought to try Merritt in secret on the bogus charges and to completely prevent the public from ever seeing the undercover videos, which are alleged to have been illegally recorded. Now, Merritt's co-defendant, David Davidson, who's the founder of the Center for Medical Progress, is they're the first undercover journalists to be criminally prosecuted in the history of the state. Liberty Counsel has shown that to date, no other citizen journalist or journalism organization has ever been charged with a crime for undercover recordings made in the public interest. Together, the weight of the evidence demonstrates that the prosecution against Merritt is selective and discriminatory. Are we still in America? Yeah, we are. But what is this? They want to try her in secret so no one can find out what they're trying her for. They wanted to do that so that they could keep anyone from finding out what she was being tried for. They don't want anybody else to learn about these videos because they make Planned Parenthood look grisly and disgusting. And the people who work there, again, grisly and disgusting. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. One of the most important things that can be done in this instance is to just keep praying for these two defendants, that they would get justice. They did some amazing work. They did something amazing for the American people who didn't know. We didn't know they were doing this. And when we found out that they were doing it, we were so disgusted and we wanted to put a stop to it. And then instead of being able to put a stop to it, we were told that not only were they still doing it, but that the U.S. government, buys some of these parts and they use it for experimentation as well. It's just terrible. So the Dow has retook 26,000. And New York prosecutors are pursuing criminal charges against Paul Manafort. They're afraid that the president will pardon him. And so they're going to make additional charges to prevent him from getting away free. And they want to see him go to jail. And then there's the Cohen Bank record story. I don't know if you heard about this, but an IRS analyst has been charged in the leak of Michael Cohen's bank records. And people have to be prosecuted for this, because think about what happens if someone releases your tax returns or your information. That's your banking information. It's your private information about your personally identifiable information that's in your tax returns. If IRS agents can't be trusted to keep that information private, secret, and secure, then, I'm all about abolishing federal agencies. Do we need the IRS? Why not just have a single postcard? You pay 10%. The IRS gets cut down to 25% of its current workforce, and all they do is just make sure that the number that you report is the number that they have, that you move the decimal points over, and 10% is what you paid by check, direct deposit, money order, wire transfer, whatever, and it's paid by the certain date, and eliminate all these loopholes and eliminate all of these IRS workers. How about that? That's one way to get rid of the corruption. Additionally, as we're talking about this, in addition to this story about the IRS, and NBC is now reporting that the Mueller report is not coming next week. Robert Mueller won't submit the report to the DOJ, to the Attorney General of the DOJ. He won't be doing that next week. And this is NBC News. Special Counsel Robert Mueller will not deliver a report to the Attorney General next week, as previously reported on multiple outlets. AG William Barr was preparing to announce the completion of the investigation into any links between President Trump and Russia as soon as next week. In a letter to Barr dated Friday, today, the chairs of 6 influential House committees suggested that withholding evidence uncovered by Mueller could be the means for a cover-up. Again, 6 influential House committees, meaning Democrats, suggested that withholding evidence uncovered by Mueller could be the means for a cover-up. So, this is because the Democrats want the findings to be made public. Top Democrats have said any potential talk of impeachment is contingent upon whether Mueller uncovers new evidence of wrongdoing. And it's Senator Dianne Feinstein reiterating her demands that the report be provided to Congress and the public because the report concerns matters that implicate the rule of law, the stability of our democracy, we're a republic, and cannot be hidden away. A summary written by AG Barr in place of the Mueller report will not be acceptable. Oh, geez. So the Democrats say after 2 years of investigation and 2 years of direct attacks on the integrity of the investigation by the president, the public is entitled to know what the special counsel has found. Notice they're not upset that, because they're going to get to know what's in the report because they're elected officials. But if the report doesn't go out to the public so they can work it around and twist it and lie about it, then it doesn't really serve any purpose. I, for one, would love just a summary so we can move past this because we know they're not going to find collusion on the part of Donald Trump. Just move ahead. In other hot news of the week, and we didn't really touch on this on the show this week. It was a great story, but we've had so much news. You might have seen, and I did post on Facebook about this, Trump wanting California to pay back the billions for the bullet train. So where did the money come from? This is money that was a part of the Obama stimulus package, and California received $2.5 billion, I believe. Yeah. And they are canceling $929 million, the Trump administration is, but the $2.5 billion has already been spent on implementing a bullet train. But here's the problem. Their governor just announced that it was financially impossible to complete the bullet train and that they weren't going to do it. So the question would be, if it's financially impossible to do and it's a boondoggle, where's the money? Now, you know the California government has spent that already, and that's why they're calling it a clawback. Gavin Newsom has vowed to fight to keep the money, and he says the reason it's getting clawed back at all is because California is suing the Trump administration over the emergency declaration. So here's how this could have worked out. Gavin Newsom could have been sitting up, with his fancy $600 loafers up on one of the coffee tables in the mansion there in California, the governor's mansion, and he could have said, we don't have that $2.5 billion. And what we should do is we should just sit this thing out. Because this is the kind of political calculations politicians used to make. They used to sit down, they used to say, let's count the cost. We want to sue with the other states to stop the border wall construction. But we also just announced that we're not going to finish this high-speed rail project, and we're into the federal government for $3.5 billion. So check the coffers. Do we have it? And the person, their treasurer, their state treasurer, could say, yeah, we don't have it. We've spent that money. And then he'd say, well, I'm pretty sure, just judging by Donald Trump, and he's a big sledgehammer. He's Thor's hammer on steroids. He's probably going to claw back that $3.5 billion if we don't just leave this thing alone. So maybe we just don't, we don't join the lawsuit. We leave it be. And it's a huge political calculation, but it's one that we have to make because we don't have the $3.5 billion to give back. And in the good old days, that would have been what they did because it's called horse trading, and it would have been the smart thing to do. But now they've gone and poked the bear again, and they're going to have to try to find that $3.5 billion to give back because they're not spending it on high-speed rail, and the federal government has no obligation to let them keep the funds. Oh, and also, enjoy your wall, because you're getting wall. Whether you're suing or not, they're getting some wall. We're all getting it. All right, that's the show for today. God bless you from the heartland. Be with you on Monday.